Welcome to the Moviegoers Society podcast, brought to you by Nerdtropolis. I'm your host, Sean Tajipour, the mayor of Nerdtropolis, and joining me once again is my co-host, Drew Munhausen, the professional and media movie mastermind. And I know we're a day late, but happy Back to the Future Day, Drew.
Happy Back to the Future Day. I actually, now in hindsight, should have done a Back to the Future background, but I went with the Flower Moon here, which, not to jump the gun, because we'll be talking about Killers of the Flower Moon in a little bit. I almost put the Osage Nation behind me or something of the sort. That I felt like that probably wouldn't be appropriate with me as, you know, one of the whitest of white men, and with what that story is about, having the Osage Nation behind me just seemed probably insensitive. So I went with the Flower Moon itself. I went with that aspect.
It's a lovely photo for sure. But behind me, I got my Back to the Future hat, and I actually have next to that hat a VHS copy of the original Back to the Future. So nice. I got us covered on that. But yeah, in this podcast, we dive into the world of cinema, exploring from everything from beloved classics to the latest blockbusters. And it looks like we're on episode 15 now, which is awesome. So we'll head to Graceland to talk about Priscilla. We'll pop into the Osage Nation with Killers of the Flower Moon, and we'll dive into the best trilogy to exist. I'm going to make that statement. Back to the Future. I'll say that. But before we get into all of that, we wanted to make sure you can connect with us online, and you can find me and myself in Nerdtropolis on every social media platform you can think of. I'm at Sean Taj, and then also you can find at Nerdtropolis on every platform you can think of. And don't forget to visit Nerdtropolis.com for your daily dose of movie news, reviews, interviews, and trailers. And Drew, where can they find you when you're not contributing to Nerdtropolis?
You can find me at Drew Munhausen on all the different social media platforms, and weekly over at Fresh Out the Podcast.
Yeah, and also don't forget to catch up on past episodes of the Moviegoers Society podcast, and tune into my podcast, Nerdtropolis Mayor Presents. You can find on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube. I got some fun stuff coming up. Talking to some directors, producers, and editors, and hopefully when the strike ends, we can get into the actors, because a lot of fun stuff happening there. But Drew, I actually watched all three Back to the Futures today because, one, I got a new surround sound system, and I have them on 4K. So I wanted to see and experience it.
That actually was going to be my question. Is how did you watch it on 4K? Did you watch it on Blu-ray? Was it streaming? And you, my friend, as a kind of fellow connoisseur of physical media, I'm proud of you for making the correct decision.
Yeah, and actually, I do have them in physical media 4K, but luckily I also have it on digital 4K as well. Do that combo packaging thing have. So that's actually really nice too, because I don't have to pop in and pop out. I could just sit there and watch all of them, just click next. So it's kind of like sitting there today and skipping some football and watching them. And man, oh man, what a blast that is. Are you a fan of this franchise, Drew? You must be.
Of course. I love this trilogy. I've seen them, I've seen all the movies multiple times. Full transparency, I came to it kind of late. I on the record, I grew up with two older sisters. So I was the youngest, and instead of growing up with like an older brother or siblings where we would watch, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Back to the Future, I had older sisters who watched a lot of like Full House and Saved by the Bell, and that's what was on the house for me. So, these I had to kind of come about them on my own later. Obviously, I knew the legacy, but I was probably in college when I first saw them. But I mean, doesn't change the fact that I love these movies, and now since then have watched them many times.
Well, there you go. I like that you said love, which I love as well. And it's a trilogy directed by Robert Zemeckis, and who wrote these with Bob Gale. And then you had Steven Spielberg signed on as producer. But I love all three films. They all have a special place in my heart. Which one is your favorite out of three of them?
The first one's definitely my favorite. I probably like them from best to worst in descending order, from 1, 2, 3, or excuse, I guess that's ascending order for number wise. But anyways, I like the first one the best, the third one probably the least best, but I love all of them.
Yeah, I actually really loved the second one because of all the crazy prediction it had for 2015, and a lot of them came to light. A lot of it did. It's wild how they had like FaceTime. They also had the Cubs winning the World Series, which it was in 2016. So they were almost on the mark on that. And I just love like the wearable technology they had. No hoverboard yet, Drew, though. I'm waiting for that hoverboard.
With all the iconic imagery from the first one, there's a fair amount from the second one too. Like you said, the hoverboard, the self-lacing shoes, things like that. Like there's a lot of iconic imagery I think that comes from the second one as well. Probably less so from the third one.
I do love the first one a lot, but the fact that the second film does take us back once again to the 50s was really cool. And so that's why I think the second one's really fun because we get a little bit of everything. It takes us all over the place. But to be honest, the third one has grown on me since I've watched it the last 5 years or so. It's a really good Western and it's really funny and it's a really touching story as well. It's Doc's story. And I think that's what's been missing the previous two films. And this one is really about Doc and what he wanted to do. And I just finished it maybe 2 hours ago, maybe an hour ago. And I like that. Emotionally, I think that's my favorite of the trilogy.
I think that's cool. I feel like that's not a hot take, but probably a less heard take. So I'm here for it. Like I said, I like all of them. I would never criticize anybody for having any of one of them be their favorite over another. So I like that that's a different take from most. I feel like the first one's probably the most common favorite, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's the best one. I mean, it is the best one, and it's the one that introduced this trilogy, and they all hold their place. But yeah, the first one's definitely like it's awesome, and then the second one kind of jumped the shark. Speaking of that Jaws 3D hologram,
another iconic moment of the 3D Jaws hologram.
But I love everything they did in the 50s with the first film and bringing that back in the second one. And then like you look out for those cameos like Billy Zane, Elijah Wood, and even Flea popping up, which is really cool. And they really do a really good job with the trilogy about time travel paradoxes and really not making it a headache when it comes to time traveling. And that's what I really love about it. You got the iconic DeLorean as well. And then third film, you got the train, which I feel like is becoming an icon now as people start watching the third film again. And that train is really cool.
Yeah, I love the flying time traveling train.
Yeah, that's a cool one. And I could see like even a short film about where Doc went, right? Give us like a 10 minutes of where Doc went with his family. And they could do that. I know they said they don't want to do a fourth film. Don't do one. Maybe there's a expensive Super Bowl commercial that embodies maybe where he went and he had to come back to present time to grab a Pepsi and take it back to wherever it was. I can see that. So if Pepsi's listening to the Super Bowl commercial, it just popped in my head right now. Wherever Doc went with that train, have him pop back in to grab a brand new Pepsi and take it back with him to where he went. And that would be perfect.
Love it. Love it.
Hopefully Pepsi does too, so I can get some money on that. But also a fun fact too, or have you seen any of that footage with Eric Stoltz? That was Originally they wanted Michael J. Fox. They couldn't get to him because of the TV show that he was on, and then they got Eric Stoltz. Didn't like it, and they begged Michael J. Fox's I guess managers and everyone else that was on charge of the what was it, All in the Family or Family Ties?
Family Ties.
Family Ties. Yep. Yes, thank you, Drew. Yeah, to get him to do that, and Michael J. Fox was doing the show during the day, then would go to set like 10 o'clock midnight, and they would film throughout the night for that first film. Just wild. But I'm glad Fox was able to do this over Eric Stoltz. No hate on Eric Stoltz, but Michael J. Fox, this was made for him.
I think that when you talk about, which we might get into here, I don't know if you want to talk about favorite moments of the trilogy, just to highlight a few, but actually the whole Eric Stoltz thing, the production of the first Back to the Future, I think is kind of one of my favorite things about the whole thing. Like I love the behind the scenes stories of how Michael J. Fox would be filming Family Ties all day, then have to rush to the Back to the Future set at night. And he got like no sleep. And, the recasting and all that happened with this movie, like it's been told a lot in different stories, the production of this movie, but I still think it's interesting. And the fact that the movie turned out as great as it did, despite all the shuffling around, is pretty incredible. Also, just like how famous Michael J. Fox was at that time is kind of insane. Like we probably take it for granted a little bit now, but back in the 80s and around the time this movie came out, he was like one of the biggest movie stars in the world. He was a huge deal.
Yeah, and I do highly recommend the documentary Still, the Michael J. Fox documentary on Apple TV, and they do dive into that and his scheduling and from Michael himself talking about this, which is amazing. I got a chance to go to a Back to the Future reunion at Dallas Fan Expo, and I'll put that video up of the whole reunion that I have. Got to meet Michael J. Fox, got my little DeLorean diecast signed by him and Christopher Lloyd. I definitely have a collection behind me. I'm not sure if you can see that behind me, but there is a section for Back to the Future. I have more stuff, but that's all I can fit over there. So I'm definitely a big Back to the Future fan and a big Michael J. Fox fan, and then obviously Christopher Lloyd. But the whole cast is great. And I'm glad we had this type of trilogy. I feel like there's not many trilogies out there that really offer three solid films, all each different and great performances. Like nothing is cheap about any of them. They went all in throughout, and I think they had the story from the beginning, according to Robert Zemeckis, which is great. They had it all planned out and they knew what they wanted to do.
And each one's inherently rewatchable and stands the test of time. So I don't see that changing anytime soon. Like they're always going to be iconic. And I hope that I really do hope that they never get remade or anything. Just let these ones be the ones.
They're not going to get remade. I think Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis have the rights to all of that. They have the musical in New York, which I will be going to see next month. So I will come back with a report on Back to the Future.
I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous. That's exciting.
Yeah, so I'm super excited. And one of my favorite jokes, I guess, throughout the trilogy is the manure that the Biff, all the different variations of Biff have to deal with. And so I wonder if we get some manure on stage for the Back to the Future musical. Boy, he's like, I hate manure. And all three of the movies. So we'll see. That's probably one of my favorite scenes, actually. That's like people don't think of in the trilogy is that line that pops up here and there. Do you have a memorable scene or line?
Oh gosh, there's so many. We've talked about them a lot. I think actually, even though the first is my favorite, I love the hoverboard chase scene that's in the second one. And anytime that scene's on, like if I'm flipping through channels and Back to the Future happens to be on, or Back to the Future 2 and that scene's on, like I'm gonna watch it through every time. So I'll say that the hoverboard chase scene from 2.
Yeah, so many awesome scenes. And so a big thank you to Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale for these movies. Fantastic job. I'm going to rewatch them again probably tomorrow. I just feel like I could just watch them all day. They need a Back to the Future channel and just have them running. I mean, I feel like that would be the most popular channel ever to exist. But definitely good times with those films. Lots of nostalgia there. But now Drew, let's head to Graceland where we're going to butt heads, the two of us. We already know that's coming. But I will say my mom's a big Elvis fan. Me and her, I took her to Graceland maybe a couple years ago, and we had a great time, and we got the backstory of everything. And she's been a big fan of Elvis for a long time. And so I knew watching Priscilla that we weren't obviously going to get a Elvis focused film. I knew exactly it's based on her book, and I'm not familiar with Sofia Coppola and her work as well. So I don't know what her style is or the type of film she did before. But Drew knows this because we saw this together, which is sometimes a rarity that we get to see films together. My mom and I both left very disappointed and left with chuckles towards the end. Unfortunately, I just thought this movie was a little unsettling of portraying Elvis in a negative light. I didn't think it was necessary, especially if he's not around, to say anything about it. But as Elvis fans, we kind of knew his personality and obviously his infidelity and everything else. I mean, that's no secret for sure. So I don't know why now was the time to tell this. I'm not sure if the previous Elvis film that went big was the reason for it, but she was also involved in that. And she's been involved with Graceland for a long time. And she's been a big person behind the scenes for Elvis, right? So she is like the number one person in charge of Elvis stuff. So I just thought it was interesting that she wanted to introduce this type of story that really makes Elvis seem really dickish, which we know he was and could be. A lot of stardom that he had. So like, I'm not excusing him for his behavior, but he and some other celebrities and artists are very rare and that they're in this class of being catapulted into fame and not knowing how to handle it. And just like Michael Jackson is one example of like complete stardom. Elvis is one of them. And there's many others like that. But this movie I thought was going to be about true love, Drew. Did you know what type of movie this was going to be about? Because I thought it was about love.
I had an inkling. I haven't read the book Priscilla and Me, or excuse me, Priscilla and Me, Elvis and Me, that Priscilla Presley's book, but I knew some of this stuff already, and so no, I was not surprised at how it was told, and Sofia Coppola. I haven't seen every movie in her filmography, but I've seen a lot of them, and things like Lost in Translation and Marie Antoinette, and even more recent ones like On the Rocks and The Beguiled. I kind of know her style and kind of knew what to expect here. And I knew with the title being Priscilla that this movie was going to be on the side of Priscilla Presley. So
right. And so did we per se, but I didn't think we were going to get this story about pretty much a 14-year-old Priscilla pretty much getting pushed to Elvis and her parents like not being okay with it, but then being okay with it, which is also odd too. Some shaking of heads towards her parents as well. What the story is kind of ridiculous to me, but it happened. And
right.
I just gotta say
I know, I guess here's where I'm at on this, right? Is like you have the big flashy Elvis biopic that came out last year that Baz Luhrmann directed. That is the movie, like tells actually a really great Elvis story. Like I actually liked that movie a lot more than I expected to. It's very much a Baz Luhrmann movie. It's very flashy. And Austin Butler's performance is really good. But it's a lot to do with the relationship between Elvis and Colonel Tom Parker, who was played by Tom Hanks in the movie.
But also didn't shy away from like the negative light of Elvis and his issues, which I do want to mention that at least. It wasn't like Elvis in all his glory. It's Elvis in his darkness as well.
Sure. But it also, like, despite showing some of his dark moments, like it really does portray him in like a sympathetic and empathetic light. And so that's like, it's a great Elvis movie. Priscilla's not an Elvis movie. It's a Priscilla Presley movie. So it's her, mostly from her perspective. And I think the portrayal of Elvis is really fascinating here. And if you're going based on the memoir, like it's how she talked about him. And I think that it's like you have the Elvis movie that paints him in a sympathetic light with kind of Colonel Tom Parker as the villain. This one has Priscilla as in a sympathetic light. And I don't know if it casts Elvis straight up as the villain, but like he's a very complex character and was a complex being. And I just trying to figure out how to get all my words right. Like Priscilla's barely in the Baz Luhrmann Elvis movie. Like she's in it in a few scenes. She barely has any lines. It doesn't really give her much.
But also, if you think about it, Drew, I will say this: Priscilla came about after Elvis was already Elvis, right? And when they also were divorcing and ending, like Priscilla, I feel like wasn't even much in his life, despite being married and together. Like he had his own.
That's why this is such a good story, because she wasn't in his life, but they were married, and so you see this movie where she's almost like a prisoner in Graceland. Like his parents are telling her, you can't leave, you can't go out in the public, we don't want people to see you. She's essentially in high school when they start dating. Like there's a lot of kind of shadiness about it. He's off making movies all the time and constantly having affairs with the leads of the movies that he's in, and like all of that allegedly is true. And
and I believe that story, Drew, and that's really not like the issue my mom and I had. I'm gonna say this, like I'm okay with like the plot of the story and all that stuff, and I believe it. I have nothing against it, but we spent a lot of time on her just showing up at school and like not saying anything to any of the students and being quiet. Like maybe that's what happened, but there's no way there wasn't an incident at school where maybe someone said something to her that pissed her off. And she said, like, there needed to be more drama. I felt like a lot of it was wasted opportunity. She was the actress that plays Priscilla, the performance she gave as Priscilla was very monotone, and we didn't see her even do much yelling or anything. You would feel like there's more emotions between this rocky relationship between her and Elvis. It just seemed like she was almost like frozen in the relationship. Maybe that's what happened, but it seemed like there was nothing going on in her head, and she was just going with the flow and then would have a couple outbursts maybe. But I realized dealing with Elvis, there had to be more issues than what was shown on screen. I think it was just too surface level going about with this film, and they could have dived more into it.
And see, again, I disagree. I think her performance is really subdued and really interesting. And I think that there's a lot of emotion, and it tells a lot, even in the things that she doesn't say. And I think that when you're in a relationship with someone as big as Elvis, like you're always going to be in that shadow, and you're always going to seem so much smaller than him. And, he's whenever he's home and he's there with her, it's like he always has his groupies, like his friends that are there. They're hardly ever alone, or when they are, it's brief and it's secluded for, whenever they are together, it's almost separated from everybody else. It really is like she was this woman that he like put away in a little box. And so she was this like very quiet, subdued girl at a young age who's, with her father who's in the military family, and then all of a sudden gets swept up in the crazy world of Elvis. I think that it's gonna, mess with your brain a little bit, and you're not gonna know how to function in a normal capacity. And so I don't know. I thought her performance was very good. I actually thought that Jacob Elordi's performance, who plays Elvis in this movie, which first off, that's a huge undertaking, especially in the shadow of Austin Butler's performance, which was really, really good. Like, man, how intimidating would it be to try to play Elvis, only a little over a year after that movie came out? Like, that's tough. And I thought Jacob Elordi's performance was really, really great. If you've seen Euphoria and you're familiar with this character of Nate Jacobs in that show, like his character in that show is kind of a psychopath, and like the way that he kind of brings some of that to Elvis, where like Elvis was this, at times you see him and he's this smooth talker and he's electric and he's so charismatic. And then he would all of a sudden flip the switch and be almost violent or abusive. And then he'd immediately walk it back and take control of himself. And it was really, really, I think, a really interesting performance that I enjoyed. I thought it was really well done. And, I think that this movie is like purposefully not flashy. You don't see much of Elvis as a performer. It's mostly him at Graceland. Like you see some bits of him like on TV or singing at the beginning, but like this story is not about Elvis as a performer. It's about Elvis as a man and who he was in their relationship.
But also that comes about, Drew, is because they have to pay if they use any Elvis music too. So like that's also probably just a direction they took of not using any actual Elvis music in this.
And that's fine. I don't think it needed it. I don't think it needed it to do that. Like we had that movie and this wasn't that. And I think that the story that this one was telling was interesting and well done. And I do understand, like, if you're a big Elvis fan and you don't want to see him portrayed in a negative light, like definitely more negative than anything that's in the Baz Luhrmann movie. Yeah, you might find this to be a little bit distasteful, but if you are telling a Priscilla Presley story and it is based on her memoir and a lot of this is contained within that, yeah, I think it's a pretty well done movie that puts you in her corner and just how it must have felt to be this isolated, tucked away girl in the crazy world of Elvis Presley.
Oh yeah, definitely a crazy world. I mean, most of the film is devoted to an underage Priscilla, kind of like getting shoved towards Elvis's way. Whoever the friend was that kind of picked her up in the diner, that was like very odd. Like, I know it happened, but I was like, in general, in real life, like that's really weird that someone came up to Priscilla and be like, you should come to Elvis's party. I know you're just a 14-year-old kid and I'm like 20 something years old. Me and my wife are going. You want to just ride along with us and ask your dad? It's mind blowing. It's a very like kind of a shocking story because this would never happen anytime today. Like, it is some eye-opening stuff and raises uncomfortable questions about what was going on back then and just the culture of things. And she, like I said, there was no love between them. I felt like she was just a big fan of Elvis that just found someone that cared about her, would always give her attention. And that's how their relationship came about. But yeah, definitely a lot of unsettling moments that I wasn't there to really watch. It was pretty unsettling.
And then, and I just was going to say, I'm not in the camp of like, this is a 5-star masterpiece. Like, no, not at all. Like, I'm probably saying this is like a 3 or a 3.5-star movie on my scale. And I know that you rated it lower than that on 2.5.
I mean, and I think like I was kind of at a 2, but I'm like, it's not a bad film, but like I'm at a 2.5. I just felt like there was a lot of scenes that they just popped in and popped out of that really like they had no service to the plot or anything like that. I thought it was edited very interesting, kind of maybe, I don't know her style. So if that's her style, cool. But in general, for this type of story, for me to get engaged with, I didn't like a lot of the editing decisions. And I thought the movie just looked like a Lifetime TV movie to me. It didn't seem like something cinematic or even indie. It just was a very odd combination when it came to costuming, the set pieces, especially if you're an Elvis fan, you can tell. I think one of the dining tables in the movie in the house never changed once. I'm like, Elvis was always changing stuff in the house. If you have a piece of furniture for like 5 year span in this whatever story they were telling, or 4 year span, it was going to change at some point. You know, he never kept anything the same. We took a tour of Graceland, so like some of the things were like they could have done a better job. So that's the way I approached it.
And the one thing I will say, because I've been mostly defending or coming from a positive standpoint, I will agree with you that some of the pacing issues I think are like it's a little off balance because there is a whole lot of her in high school and those early years of what it was like for her to be in a relationship with Elvis and moving into his house and things, really a lot before they even get married. And then especially the last act of the film, like I feel like it kind of steamrolls through their later years in life and what that was like. And it's like, okay, some of this stuff I actually would have been interested to see a little bit more of or spent some more time here. I could have taken a little bit less time of the things up front and a little bit more time up here. So I do think like the pacing isn't perfect and there maybe could have been a better balance of things. But ultimately, I did think it was an interesting story that was worth telling. And I can understand what you're saying about the aesthetic of the movie. I guess I didn't think it looked like cheap or like a TV thing, but it definitely is subdued for the flashiness of Elvis. And it's something that I liked and I thought played to the strength of the movie rather than being a weakness.
Yeah, going back to what I said, like surface level wise, I'm like, there's a lot of interesting parts that they just skim over, which is the more deeper situations. And you just mentioned the school aspect of it was something that was just pointless. Why are we seeing her go to school and nothing's happening? She's just like twiddling her thumbs and like blanking out because she's thinking about other things, but you don't know exactly what she's thinking and hoping for. And it's just like, oh, all right, we get you're going to school, but what purpose does it serve?
And see, I think that if I had to defend that, like not to go too much in the weeds because I know we're going to be ready to move on here soon, but I think that played into the isolation. Like she was told, you can't bring anybody, any friends back here from school. Like you can't do that. So even at school, she had to be isolated and couldn't talk to anybody and really couldn't be outgoing or make friends. So she was just quiet and went to school and all the girls talked about her behind her back because there were, the rumors that she was in a relationship with Elvis or had ties to him. But, she couldn't be friendly with anybody in a way. So I thought that was the point of it. That being said, there probably was a little bit too much of it. But like I do think that that's probably what they were going for.
Yeah, and I'll on this note, I'll end on this. In the ending, I guess I don't want to give it away, but I'm gonna give it away a little bit. But like the song choice they played at the end was comical to me. And I thought the ending was very awkward too. I mean, that's just the way they ended. I was like, it was very dry. And then the song is this song that I think Elvis sang to Priscilla when they ended things, which was ironic. And I just thought the ending was kind of cheesy to me. And that's when my mom and I turned to each other and kind of chuckled. I was like, this is kind of comical, honestly, but it is what it is.
Fair enough. I won't argue that.
So let's leave it at that. But go check out Priscilla and let us know what you think. Drew, you gave it a 3.5.
Yeah, I'll stick with the 3.5.
About a 2.5. So not too far off, but definitely check out the other Elvis film if y'all haven't watched that yet. But now is the time to go to Osage Nation with Killers of the Flower Moon, which I know Drew was super excited about. A Martin Scorsese film. I'll let Drew kick us off with this one.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. Killers of the Flower Moon. It's been in production for what seems like forever. Like I thought this movie was going to get released last year. It got released this year. I've just been waiting for this for a long time. I'm a big fan of Martin Scorsese. I've been waiting for this since The Irishman came out. And, I went to school in Oklahoma. And so like I have a lot of friends that live there and I have some ties there. And so the fact that this all happened in Oklahoma and there's so much history there and was all filmed on location. I was just eagerly anticipating this one. I purchased the book probably like 2 years ago and finally read it about a year ago. So I had read the book and I was familiar with the story. So I had a little bit of knowledge of what it was. And
so first off, let me ask you this then, just before you dive into further. compared to the book, which one's more, I mean, how is it handled, the book to the film? Like, is it a fair adaptation?
They're very different. They're very different. So the book is really fascinating because the book it's this is a true story. What this is based on, the Osage murders. For anybody who's not familiar with the story, basically what happened was the Osage people were forced out of their home in Missouri and given this very just not preferable piece of land in Oklahoma. Like, it was considered to be pretty bad land, but they needed a place to put the Osage Indians. We'll put them on this land. And turns out that the land was extremely rich in oil. So the Osage people went from being, displaced from their home to being some of the richest people in the country. And they had a lot of material wealth, but just due to, at the time, it was the white men that were in charge of the country. There were a lot of rules and regulations put on the Osage Indians and how they could use their money. They had guardians. They had a lot of, just restrictions in place, but they still had a lot of material wealth, which led to a lot of, like, I guess, the white men coming in and, like, making their way into the community kind of in search of the wealth. So that's, and I guess, it's not a spoiler to say, like, and murders came from it. So a lot of murders, a whole lot of murders. And the book, it's a nonfiction book, so it's all facts, like all the quotes and everything are things that people really said from documents from the investigation. But the book is told still almost like a fictional narrative. Like, it describes everything like you're reading a narrative, despite it being a nonfiction book. This case, the Osage murders, kind of led to the birth of the FBI. It was like one of the first official cases of the FBI. And that's more of the story of what the book is telling you. It puts you kind of in the perspective, it sets everything up. And then a lot of it's from the perspective of, is it Tom White? Do I have the name right? I believe. Yeah.
The last name is White. Yeah.
Who's the FBI agent sent to Oklahoma to investigate these murders. And so a lot of it's with him and his team and how he was investigating and kind of things unrolling from there, and kind of leading up to the reveals of who all was really behind it. And this movie, this adaptation, takes a totally different perspective and kind of lets you know from the get-go exactly what's happening and who's behind it. And then shows how all of it unfolded that way. And the FBI, I would say, is downplayed somewhat. Like, they don't come in until much later into the movie. This is a 3.5 hour movie. You really don't get the FBI stuff going until like hour, maybe in the 2 hour mark or so. Like, it takes a while. So it's very interesting. And so you have Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro as some pretty deplorable people in this movie, villainous roles, but putting a lot of it in their perspective, but also from the perspective of Molly Burkhart, played by Lily Gladstone, who's absolutely tremendous in this movie. And I don't know, Sean, I've been talking for a while. I want to throw it back to you a bit because I think I could talk for days about this movie. I guess at the end of the day, as I was watching this, I definitely felt the length at times, but I also didn't hate that. Like, it wasn't a negative for the movie. It's long, but it's so delicate and particular with how it tells the story. It's like no detail is spared, but I think it just all played into the narrative even better. So I enjoyed the length for what it was. And I just, as I'm watching I was like, am I watching a masterpiece play out in front of me? And as it ended, I'm like, I'm kind of with it. Like, I thought this was amazing. I thought it was really incredible. So, Sean, I wanted to toss it back to you to hear what you thought about it.
Yeah, so the narrative, it's like a crime and love story combined is what this film is. And speaking of the runtime, what was it, 3 hours and 26 minutes? It's fine. The problem I have with it is it gets so dark early now. That's what's affecting me enjoying these films at night, is how quickly it's getting dark. So my brain thinks it's much later than it is. But this film at a 3 hour, 26 or 16 minutes, whatever it is, it's fine. It's just what Mother Nature is doing outside that's affecting my brain, getting anxious to get out of it at some point. But I loved every aspect of it. I love Scorsese.
I went to a 6:30 screening and I got out after 10 o'clock. So yeah, it's.
Did you have did you have trailers? That was my question previously. So did you have trailers with yours?
There were trailers. I saw this at the Alamo Drafthouse, and there were multiple trailers. I know I saw a trailer for The Holdovers, and I saw a couple other trailers. Yeah, there were trailers.
Yeah, so I got to go to the press screening, so no trailers there, so I felt lucky there. But I love Scorsese taking us to a 20th century Oklahoma with these sets and costumes and the great cinematography. Like, I thought I was transported to a time. The details were amazing, from the vehicles and just the roads and the buildings. I was just mesmerized just by the set that was created. It was mind-blowing to me.
They essentially like recreated this town. It's like you said, you feel like you're transported there. It is uncanny. And this movie had a big budget, and we can talk about that in a bit. So it's not like, they did all this on the cheap. Like, they spent a lot of money on this movie, but man, it looks so good on screen compared to movies that have super high VFX budgets that still don't look good. Like, this movie looks incredible.
Yeah, it's like watching something on the History Channel, but it's like real deal. It's awesome. But yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro, all great, compelling performances. I thought Robert De Niro was amazing in this. Like, he really did something special. He did something amazing with his performance. He brought something extra that I haven't seen before, I felt like, with his delivery and just the way he acted throughout the movie. And obviously, I have to give props to Lily Gladstone, who really is the heart of this film and really makes you care about this movie. Without her portrayal as Molly Kyle, this movie wouldn't be anywhere close to where it is as masterpiece wise, because she's so mesmerizing and offers an emotional and spiritual layer is very important to include. Like, she does such an amazing job combining those two, and very important to have her with the authentic performance and going to captivate audiences, if you end up watching it in theaters, where it's out now or whenever it lands on Apple TV Plus.
There's something to be said about being like, Lily Gladstone has been working for a while. Like, she's not new to acting by any means, but she's also, of those three, clearly the least known. And the fact that she's going, head to head in some of these big scenes with Leonardo DiCaprio, one of our great actors currently, and they're having scenes opposite one another, and she's so good. And, Leo obviously has all the charisma and is wonderful too. And she's still almost like blowing him off the screen.
Yeah, she matches his level and then elevates him and then just takes over the scene, and really is like, shows she's actually in charge of the whole like story, it seems like. And she's like ahead of him, and he's just trying to figure out what's going on and then finds himself in some trouble. But she's definitely leading the family, leading like the whole area. Like, it's pretty awesome to see this type of character on screen.
Yeah, it's just, and it's not to say that Leo's bad or anything, because he's not. He's actually excellent in this movie, and it's one of my favorite performances of his in recent years, just because it's I don't want to say it's different. He's played, characters that are kind of broken internally, or their moral compass is way off. So that's not new, but just, I don't know, the way that he's playing Ernest Burkhart's, it's really intriguing. But Lily Gladstone as Molly Burkhart in this is wonderful. And she gets kind of, I won't say how or why, just because even though this is all history and things that really happened, like, I do want people to discover this story on their own. But there is a decent portion of the movie where she's kind of sidelined, is what I'll say. But even still, like, she's just this wonderful presence that's looming throughout. And I think that's my big takeaway from it, is how wonderful she was.
Yeah, we also get performances by Jesse Plemons and Brendan Fraser, who pop up in here. I will say this: Brendan Fraser's performance was kind of weird to me in this. It was just like he popped in, and I just was head scratcher for me. I didn't know how to take it. Like, awesome, he's in here, and I'm like, it's just, he's not in it for long, and his character's kind of wackadoodle for what it is. And I was just like, did we really need him? Because it kind of took away from the movie too, just a tad. But he was still good to watch.
I agree. Like both Brendan Fraser and John Lithgow show up in like what the last 30 or 45 minutes of the movie, which is a very long movie. So it's, a long way down the line as these like 1920s lawyers who are just really loud and over the top. And it kind of, I do think it fits into the movie, but like Brendan Fraser, who just won an Oscar, who's kind of been back in the public eye here recently, seeing him here and just immediately yelling and pointing. There were like, I think I heard at least a snicker or laugh in the theater when it happened. And I think you just can't help it because people are like getting used to seeing Brendan Fraser again, especially in this where he's just this loud lawyer.
Yeah, over the top. And I love this movie. The only negative thing I can say about it, other than like slight runtime, but that's not really a complaint. The film, how it ended, I'm not going to say much, but very Asteroid City-esque. I hated that.
I loved the ending. I loved
you like the ending. I didn't like it,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, oh, this is kind of like I just saw this in another movie similarly, and so maybe if I didn't see Asteroid City and I saw this, I'd be like, oh, this is cool. But the fact it was very reminiscent of Asteroid City to me, I was just like, okay.
I don't want to say exactly what it is, but I'll just say like the ending is something in place of doing traditional kind of title cards telling you the fates of people and what happened. They take a different approach to it, which I could understand it taking you out of the movie in a way, but I also think that with the way that this story was told in the years that followed, that this was a very fitting end to this movie. So and there's something in it that, again, a big part of it that could take you out of the movie, or you could find to be extremely powerful. I found it to be extremely powerful and moving. So I can understand when I saw it, I was like, this will be divisive. I've talked to other people that have seen this movie and they are with you, Sean. Like they did not like the ending. I really loved it.
If I didn't see Asteroid City, I've been like, oh, this is awesome. I would have been on board 100%. I just felt like it was almost not a copy, but I was like, it's very similar to what I saw and it took away. But I still gave this movie 4.5 out of 5 stars, Drew.
Yeah, and I'm going 5 out of 5. Even though this movie is as long as it is, I can't wait to watch it again. And I think that's worth noting before we completely sign off. This movie made $44 million at the worldwide box office this weekend. It made, hold on, I had this up earlier. It made 23 million domestic. It came in second place behind week 2 of Taylor Swift, the Eras Tour, which is fine. Nobody expected Killers of the Flower Moon to move that, but this movie cost $200 million to make, which is a lot. But Apple footed the bill, and then they worked with Paramount to assist with distribution to give it a theatrical run. But basically, in 3 weeks, this movie is going to be on Apple TV Plus, which is really interesting. So it's getting that theatrical run, but essentially they spent all that money on it, not necessarily in the hopes of earning that back through the box office. I think it's more of to create awareness for Apple TV Plus, where this movie will live in the next couple weeks. And it'll be interesting to see if that gamble pays off, if people do watch it. If I rewatch it, I don't know if I'm going to be able to sit and watch it again in one sitting. We'll see, but I'm still looking forward to seeing it again. And I don't know if I'll see it again in theaters, but I'll definitely watch it when it's back on Apple TV Plus. But it's a 5 out of 5 for me.
Yeah, I think this is a movie that you can watch at home more comfortably than in theaters if you're not used to really long films. I mean, we're talking over 3 hours. I don't know the last time we talked about anything that was over 3 hours. So this is something. Drew, you got a fun fact for us of some about 3-hour films that have hit the theaters in the last 20 years or so, or 30 years? I can't think of anything that was that long.
I couldn't tell you the last time I saw something that long in theaters, because even like Avengers Endgame, it flirted with 3 hours, but didn't cross it. The Irishman was super long, but that was a Netflix release. I didn't see it in a theater. So I can't, there's nothing coming to mind. I feel like it's been a while, maybe because even the Avatar sequel wasn't over 3 hours. It's long, but it's not that long.
No, I think Titanic maybe is pulling up. I'm just searching with over 3 hour movies, and for some reason Titanic pops up. The Irishman pops up, but I don't know if that's with credits. Maybe it pushes it over.
Oh no, The Irishman is super long. It's like 3.5 hours long. Also, I can't. I don't remember its exact runtime,
but not many. So this is definitely a cinematic gem that I think you might, if you're not used to it, maybe just watch it on Apple TV Plus. But great film. We both really loved it, and we'll see what he does next for us, Martin Scorsese. He's gonna keep making films. He's doing really well so far. He's got quite the career, that young chap, right? Very young chap.
He says he's not done. So yeah, I mean, I guess there's more to look forward to from him.
Yeah, we'll see what he does next. I'm excited for more. I love everything he does, even though they are pretty lengthy. They're worth it. They're very quality cinema, is what we call it.
Oh, I saw Babylon in theaters, which was 3 hours and 9 minutes long. So about 25 minutes shorter still than Killers of the Flower Moon, but still over 3 hours. So there's one.
And that movie was 3 hours too long. I'll leave that for that film, which is also a divisive film. But
we didn't have this podcast at that time, but that would have been one where we would have clashed yet again, because I thought Babylon was awesome.
Yeah. We'll have to do that on like a classic watch night or something like that. That movie in the next couple of years.
Yes, and then I get to make you rewatch it. That sounds perfect.
There you go. But yeah, if you haven't checked out our previous episodes of the Moviegoers Society, make sure to check them out. We got plenty of fun episodes for you to check out, and also check out my podcast, Nerdtropolis Mayor Presents, where I interview directors, actors, all on the Nerdtropolis Podcast Network. And once again, Drew, where can they find you?
You can find me at Drew Munhausen on all the social medias, weekly over at Fresh Out the Podcast, and here on the Moviegoers Society podcast, where again, I implore you, go back and listen to the old episodes, especially the one last week. We talked about a lot of series, one of which isn't even out yet still. So in the future, when you watch Monarch, or if you're watching Follow the House of Usher on Netflix, go back and listen to that episode, because we talk about those things.
Yeah, a lot of good movies and series that we cover. But thanks again for joining us for another episode of the Moviegoers Society. Once again, I am Sean Tajipour, the mayor of Nerdtropolis, and we will see you at the movies.